It wasn't uncommon for Sith Lords to have cults dedicated to them. Many Dark Lords set themselves up as deities wherever they ruled, and not all of their followers and underlings were fellow Sith. But as time went on, this practice fell out of style for the Sith, until the Rule of Two. During the third generation of the Banite Sith, they would experience a split which spawned a cult that ran parallel to the Rule of Two. And as Bane's plan reached its full fulfillment in Palpatine, the cult would return to worship him. Darth Sidious would discover that they possessed powers of foresight that exceeded even his own, and soon they became the source of many victories for the Empire, until the day when they gave Palpatine a prophecy that he did not want to hear. Greetings lore junkies, and welcome to the archives today. In this holocron, we are going to be discussing a mysterious religion known as the Prophets of the Dark Side, Palpatine's favorite, or at least once favorite dark side cult. But before we open the holocron, I urge you to subscribe to gain more knowledge in the dark side and knowledge that the Sith have attempted to bury. The information in these archives are ever at your disposal, and they are here for you. But now, my friend, let us begin. The origins of the Prophets of the Dark Side date all the way back to the beginnings of the Rule of Two. Bane's apprentice Darth Zana took for herself an apprentice by the name of Cognis, and once Darth Cognis rose to the position of Dark Lord, she and the student that she inducted would form the third generation of the Rule of Two. That student's name was Darth Millennial. As an Iktachi, Darth Cognis was adept at future sight, and passed on her knowledge of the subject to Darth Millennial. But while this human apprentice appreciated the power of foresight, he did not share Bane's vision of the Sith future and the Rule of Two. Millennial was of the opinion that the Sith would be stronger if they stuck to the idea of the way of the Brotherhood of Darkness, which was to have many Sith in their order rather than only two of them. Cognis had known Bane when he was alive, and so she was a staunch loyalist to the doctrine that he instated. The two Sith Lords butted heads over this topic several times, until Darth Cognis resolved that Millennial was not worthy of being her apprentice any longer. Fearing his master's rage, Darth Millennial fled from her to the ancient Sith world of Dromund Kaas. There, he learned from whatever was left over of the Sith knowledge that he could find, and established his own order which followed his own ideals. This was the beginning of the Prophets of the Dark Side. The apostate apprentice became the very first Supreme Prophet, and began inducting many into his new cult. Their main base of operations became the highest tower in the Dark Force Temple. This was a place which was a nexus of dark side power, which would soon serve them in their greater mission. Their structural organization was very straightforward. The Supreme Prophet was at the very top, serving as the figurehead of the religion, but beneath him were the High Prophets, who assisted in directing religious activities and guiding the cult. Beneath them were the Lesser Prophets, that formed the bulk of the ranks, and who acted as agents of the cult's will. And while technically not a part of the Prophets, they did use many minions and servants, those who were treated as the lowest caste. But when Darth Millennial created the Prophets of the Dark Side, he did not simply have them as Sith imitators. Millennial had deeply respected his master's gift and foresight, and so he made this the cult's entire main focus. Foremost among their beliefs was that the dark side would reveal the future. They treated all Force visions as a divine will, and each one was trained to delve into the possible future outcomes of any event. This actually sets them apart from the Orthodox Sith, as they respect and worship the will of the Force. The Prophets of the Dark Side do not attempt to control the Force fully. Where the Sith sought to bend the Force to their own will, and to bring their own desired outcomes, the Prophets subjected themselves to it. They saw their order as mystics in service of destiny. This may sound very Jedi-like to some, but there was a fundamental difference between them and the Jedi. Their belief in their visions was so strong that they took actions to guarantee the outcome. And so the main function of the Prophets was to dispatch agents to enforce the will of destiny by any means necessary. It is suggested that the Prophets foresaw the destruction of both Death Stars, and may have helped manipulate events behind the scenes. To get the rebellion into a position of victory, it is rumored that the Prophets of the Dark Side helped them, or perhaps they were the ones who leaked the location of the rebel secret base on Yavin 4 to the Empire, so they could force the Battle of Yavin to occur, having seen the destruction of the Death Star in future sight. The Prophets are incredibly unique because while they revere Sith teachings, they do not totally follow them. Rather, they are beholden to the will of the Force and what they believe the future holds. But they do not serve the will the way that the Jedi do either, as they take an active part in forming the future that they see. Along with this, they have a rule by the strong principle, as only the most powerful among them may rule. only the most powerful may ever become the supreme prophet. Along with future sight, the prophets also delved into Sith sorcery as well, using powerful magic to aid them in their missions. They were privy to force lightning, illusion, mind trickery, Sith alchemy, and even resurrection. But they were not simple mystics either, but dangerous in live combat as well. A handful of them wielded lightsabers, and nearly all of them were adept in melee combat. This was necessary, not just for self-defense, but in ensuring the future outcomes that they foresaw. They were not above assassination or espionage, and they would do nearly anything to get the outcome that they had seen. During the 1,000-year time of peace, the prophets of the dark side would remain on Dromund Kaas. Presumably they operated from the shadows, helping direct galactic events. Based on the fact that they were started by a renegade Sith Lord, we can assume that they were well aware of the Rule of Two, along with the change that they would bring about. So they lay in wait, ready to serve when Palpatine would eventually rise to power, believing themselves to be in eternal service to the Rule of Two. They revered Palpatine as the catalyst of the galaxy's greatest evolution. Their only known operation during this time is their establishment of a base on Calicar 6 in the year 100 BBY. But beyond that, their movements were shrouded until sometime prior to the Clone Wars, when Palpatine discovered them yet again. Having ventured over the world of Dromund Kaas, he had come across the prophets of the dark side. But rather than seeing them as a threat to the Sith plan, he saw an asset. Their powers and foresight exceeded even his own by his own admittance. This may have been because they meditated on the dark side nexus in the tower of their temple. But either way, Sidious soon came to trust their visions as much as he did his own, and he used their foresight to confirm what he himself saw in the future. When Dooku joined him and became Darth Tyrannus, Palpatine ordered him to wipe all records of Dromund Kaas out of the Jedi archives, along with Kamino and over 30 other systems. The prophets stayed out of the Clone Wars entirely from what we can tell, since their services weren't really needed. Palpatine was the puppet master of the entire war, and he had manipulation well under his control. However, a battle was fought on Dromund Kaas between the Republic and the Separatist armies. Ventress, who had been in charge of the Separatists there, would actually defer to the prophets of the dark side and their wisdom. Peering deep into the Force, the prophets gave her precise information on the Republic's strategy and attack patterns. Ventress proceeded to use this to her advantage to defeat the 327th Star Corps, an account we only know of because Ventress annotated it in the Book of the Sith. But Sidious had greater plans for the prophets. He located two fallen Jedi by the names of Kadan and his apprentice Jedgar, in order to gain control of the prophets and to make them fully his. Sidious instated the two Dark Jedi as their leaders, making Kadan the new Supreme Prophet, and Jedgar the new High Prophet. Together, they learned the ways of the religion and became adept seers just like the rest of the prophets. Following the Jedi Purge and the rise of the Empire, the prophets of the dark side would be slightly reorganized into the Secret Order of the Emperor. There, they served him as a clandestine network, embedded throughout all levels of the Empire. Very few people ever saw or even knew about the prophets, besides the Grand Moffs and Palpatine's own inner circle. And to them, they only knew these men as the Emperor's mages. Like before, they served him largely as advisors, those who confirmed the validity of his own visions. They also deciphered warnings that he could not see. So while Sidious mostly relied on his own future sight, he would often consult with the prophets to ensure the correctness of his own vision. This allowed him to double and triple check his plans, which allowed him to stay one step ahead of the entire galaxy. This is actually how we believe Sidious found out that Vader was training Starkiller. Along with this, the prophets of the dark side served as a next-level training regimen for Darksiders in the Empire. They would often travel throughout the Empire and recruit Force sensitives that they could locate. It was their job to train them, so they could be sorted into either the Inquisitorius, the Shadow Guard, or the hands of the Emperor. Sometimes, Palpatine would even send certain of his agents to train with them so that they could grow stronger and gain a deeper understanding of the dark side. Palpatine did this with his Inquisitor Jarek, who ended up growing to become one of the most powerful Darksiders of the entire New Republic era, a character whose power is severely underestimated by large portions of the fanbase. The Prophets of the Dark Side worked as his main adepts and scholars of the Force. One of them, Lord Kronal, was so adept at alchemy that he became Palpatine's primary monster creator. But despite Sidious's reliance on them, he didn't always heed their warnings. If they gave him a prophecy that he did not want to hear, he would dismiss them. This didn't happen very often, but when it did, it mattered significantly. This would be one of the last mistakes that Palpatine ever made. Prior to the Battle of Endor, Supreme Prophet Kadan approached the Emperor, informing him that balance would be restored to the Force at Endor. He was foreshadowing Palpatine's downfall. However, he never got a chance to give him any details because the Emperor laughed in his face and then turned to rage. His scorn broke the trust that had been shared between the Dark Lord of the Sith and the prophets of the dark side for 1,000 years. So, fearing for their lives, the prophets fled from Palpatine right before Endor. They abandoned both Dromund Kaas and Kalakar 6 so that Sidious could not find them, and they made their retreat to a new world, the world of Bosthrida. At that point, the prophets declared that they no longer associated with the Empire, only the dark side. And because of this, the prophets survived the destruction of the Emperor. However, the one thing that they did not foresee was their own destruction. In 5 ABY, only a year after Endor, Lady Lumaya and the traitorous royal guard Karnor Jax tracked down the hidden prophets. They enlisted Azrakel, one of the prophet's former students, to their side. Azrakel had a burning hatred for Kadan and worked with Lumaya and Jax to bring about the cult's end. He himself went in and slaughtered several prophets, including Kadan, before eventually falling in battle. Afterwards, Lumaya and Jax arrived to clean up the rest of the clan, ultimately eradicating the cult, executing the prophets of the dark side in one decisive single purge. And so, the religion that had endured for 1,000 years was brought to an abrupt end by no less than a traitor. Although the main group was wiped out, their legacy would live on, but in a less savory way. Lord Kronel, who we mentioned earlier, had left the prophets prior to their destruction. Striking off on his own, he founded a group called the Church of the Dark Side, which ended up becoming the prophet's spiritual successor. However, they were not nearly as powerful, nor did they serve the same purpose as their predecessors. Kronel would shape the church into a public religion, one that glorified the dark side, but it was actually just propaganda to rally people into the Imperial remnant. While the church had genuine dark side adepts, they were mostly phonies, false prophets, those that had no real powers in the Force. They committed fraudulent miracles and used elaborate but meaningless rituals. This was to hopefully rally support for what was left of the Empire, to make them strong yet again. One of their greatest charlatan schemes was the Glove of Vader. They claimed that the new Emperor would wear the indestructible right gauntlet from Darth Vader's armor, bringing the Empire back to its former glory. To facilitate this, they retrieved Vader's glove from the ruins of Endor, gifting it to a man by the name of Triacolis, backing his ascension to the Imperial throne. In truth, Triacolis was nothing more than a puppet of the Moff Council who organized this charade with the church in order to consolidate power over the Imperial factions. When Lord Kronel was eventually defeated by Luke Skywalker, the Church of the Dark Side was exposed for the imposters that they truly were, and afterwards, the organization completely disintegrated. So anyway, my friends, this was one of the strangest dark side cults that worship Palpatine. I always think it's fascinating to explore Force religions with nuance. A lot of dark side cults can be summarized as being weaker carbon copies of the Sith, but despite the prophets of the dark side being literally created as an offshoot of the Rule of Two, they distinguished themselves quite a bit. And in the end, they didn't really serve the will of Palpatine as much as they served the will of the Force and of the dark side, which makes them unique. One may even say that they succeeded in this better than the Jedi ever did. It seems to us that they may have ended up helping to facilitate Anakin's return as well, if it served their vision. So although the prophets of the dark side used the dark side, their intentions are almost lawful neutral in nature, as they simply served destiny, and they served Palpatine as a part of that destiny until the Force informed them otherwise. But anyway, my friends, what do you think about this fascinating cult of darkside adepts? As always, thank you so much for watching. Hit that subscribe button to explore more darkside lore, and as always, may the Force be with you.